Hey, what's going on, youth pastors? I hope you're having a great day today. As of recording this, it is April of 2025 and the sun is setting later. Everything is getting warmer. It's getting warmer outside. That was a really dumb way to say that. But it's a good time. Summer's coming up, camp's coming up soon, lots of things, cool things coming up and whatnot. So most of the videos I've made on this channel have been specific towards youth ministry, but there's, quite an array of other things that I've been involved in within ministry, not just youth ministry specifically. So some things like I was a creative director for churches for a little while, for just under 7 years or so, but also I was part of a church plant, and there's lots of things that you learn about being part of a church plant. So that same church I was a creative director for was a church plant, and so we were there for just under 7 years or so, and we joined that church a few months before they launched, and so we were there from literally the very beginning all the way up until close to 7 years. It was like 6.5, give or take. And church planting is becoming a really popular thing. Lots of pastors are planting churches, and you can debate whether or not revitalizing churches or strengthening existing churches is better, or planting new churches is better. Either way, I think having more healthy churches, no matter how that happens, is always the best option. So more churches and healthier churches, that is always the best option. And so you might be either going into a church plant, maybe you're thinking about a church plant, whether it's being part of a team or planting a church yourself. There's, all sorts of different things that come with that. So I figured I'd give a little bit of some of my input and some of my kind of experiences being part of a church plant for several years. So I've got 5 things to keep this list nice and simple and short and focused in. So these are things that I've learned, and things that I would say this is, if you go into a church plant, most people have lots of preconceived ideas and concepts of what a church plant will be like. And if you go into a church plant with really unrealistic and not grounded ideas of what it'll be like, then you set yourself up for some very, very hard failure. And that's just kind of the reality of it. If you think it's going to be this super ultra exciting, everything's going to click, everything's going to go well super quickly, then very likely it's going to be an incredibly frustrating, incredibly agonizing experience. But if you can go into it with some good expectations of what it's really like, it sets you up for the long game, because there's a statistic that I don't remember where it's from, but within a church plant, within the first year of it launching, about 80% of that lead team that launches the church will be gone. So if you go and you start a church with a team of 10 people, you, maybe your spouse, and then 10 people, by the end of the first year, you will likely, at least statistically, have about 2 people left. And that's because people go in with all sorts of ideas and all sorts of concepts of what a church plant's going to be like. And most of the time, they're not super accurate. So here's tales or lessons from actually being part of a church plant. And here's 5 things I want to give you to help you go into it, if you're going into it or thinking about it, praying about it, to help you have realistic expectations about it. So first one is this, and this is, I would say, so vital. This is so vital. You have to get this through your brain somehow. The most important thing is this: it takes time. It takes time. So I'll share from my experience. So I was fresh out of college, moved away from my hometown, and I was 19 years old, moved to this new church plant in May of 2016, and we launched in August of 2016. And so I figured, and most of us that were on this team, the pastors, the team, various people that are moving to this church plant, most of us thought, okay, we're going to start launch Sunday with a few hundred people, maybe 300, 500 people, something like that. And we're just going to kind of grow from there, and it's going to be amazing. And, within a year or so, maybe 2 years, if we really want to stretch it, I'll be full-time. The pastor's going to be full-time. And then we're going to start employing people. And then maybe after a few years, like, I don't know, 3-ish years or something like that, then we're going to find ourselves in like a building project, and we're going to get a building, whether buy, build, or something like that. But we're going to have like more of a permanent location, because we started, loading in and out, kind of like a portable situation is what we started out with. And so that was the expectation. We thought, give it about 3 to 4 years and we'll be in a really stable, stationary spot and everything's going to go super great. We're just going to grow, launch, do everything. It's going to be great. So none of that happened whatsoever, even remotely close to that expectation. What happened was launch Sunday, we had like 50-ish people. I think it was 55 people. And then the next Sunday dwindled a little bit. And then after a few weeks, we were at a solid 25, 30, I think, somewhere in there. And then for about 6 months, we kind of stayed at about 30, maybe 40 or so people. And then it wasn't really until like our year 3 that we finally on an Easter Sunday broke 200 people. And then kind of COVID came in and, all sorts of other things happened. So none of that really came into play. And it wasn't even until about the 4th, 5th year or so that I finally went part-time. Like our pastor went part-time about a year before I think I did. And then it was about the 4th, 5th year, somewhere in there. I think it was closer to the 4th year that finally I went part-time. And so it was like the timeline was entirely different from what we expected the timeline to be. And so here's kind of the reality of it is church plants take time. They just take time. It takes a lot of time to build culture. It takes a lot of time for vision to be really clear and concise and focused. It takes a lot of time for people to know that you even exist in the first place. It takes a lot of time for all sorts of things to happen, to develop people, to empower people, to equip people. Everything just takes time. Now, I don't want to be like the whole like Debbie Downer and like, nothing's going to go super great or whatever. Because there's always those cases and those instances where you jump in and you plant a church and you've got a lot of people and you've got great momentum and things do take off. And I will be the first in line to pray with you, to believe with you, to cheer you on that happens, because that would be incredible. That would be awesome. That you start with a lot of people and you grow and you have, the building and all that sort of stuff. That stuff makes having a really great community a whole lot easier. So I'll be the first in line to pray with you and believe with you for that. However, statistically, the vast majority of church plants, it's a very, 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 very slow burn. And if you go in thinking it's going to be quick and think it's going to kind of just sort itself out very fast, then you're going to set yourself up for a lot of frustration. So the most important thing, first off, is that it takes time. Second one is sort of kind of like it, but it just takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work and a lot of hard work. Somebody kind of roughly put it kind of like this, is that at an established church, if say you go a few weeks, few months, and you kind of slack off on work and you don't quite do things the way you should do, or maybe you miss tasks or something like that, then the result is that your service, if you're at an established church, your services, your experiences, your events, all that sort of stuff, it's just not going to be quite as good, and will be left on the table. It'll just lack something about it. But in a church plant, especially those first few years, if you slack on your work and you don't get things done and you kind of just get lazy about things, it's not that your services aren't going to be as good. It's just the church is just going to straight up fizzle out. And it's kind of like this idea of, at an established church, if you don't set out chairs, people don't have a place to sit. But in a church plant, if you don't set out chairs, you don't have church. And so the stakes are just a lot higher because there's just a lot more work that has to be done. You don't have a ball of momentum that is keeping the thing rolling and moving forward. So at an established church, if you don't do as great of a job for a few weeks, there's still the momentum of things happen. But in a church plant, you've got to do a lot more work up front to just make the thing happen, just to get to the next Sunday, just to get to the next Wednesday, just to get to the next, whatever the thing is that you do on a weekly routine basis. And so, many nights are taken up by a whole lot of work within your church. So the way I like to describe it to people was you work 2 full-time jobs and you only get paid for one. So you work your full-time job and maybe you have a 9 to 5. And so it's kind of nice and routine. And then your evenings are spent working on a lot of things for church, whether it's sermon prep, whether it's getting things ready for the weekend, whether it's meeting with people, developing people, learning, growing yourself, that sort of stuff. And so you're working a whole lot, and lots of nights are taken up by it. Lots of weekends are taken up by it. And here we have a special guest, my cat. Then you have load in and load out. You have assuming most likely your church is going to be portable, so you're going to load in and load out. Penny, get out of here. Hey. Also, you're going to load in and load out probably on a weekly basis, if not every couple weeks or so. And that's just a lot of work. You got to wake up extra early on Sunday mornings, go through all the load in process. And then after church is done, you've got to load out and maybe take things to a storage unit, stuff like that. So you got load in, load out. You got all the marketing. People have to know that your church exists in the first place. And it takes a lot to just get the word out. Maybe it's social media, whether it's flyers or meeting people, going out in your community, being part of events that are going on in your community, but also then just the events themselves. You've got Easter, you've got Christmas, you've got various events that you put on as a church by yourself. So there's a lot of work that has to be done in order just for the thing to keep going and to keep having another Sunday or another Wednesday or whatever kind of weekly thing that you end up doing at that church plant. So it takes a lot of time. Takes a whole lot of work. And third, and this is kind of a bit of a make or break for a lot of people, is you have to be flexible. One thing that is super consistent about any church plant is that nothing is consistent whatsoever. You have to be super flexible. If you cannot bend, you will 100% break. Being flexible is so vital. It is so important because your venue is going to change maybe on a weekly basis. Who's going to be there and available on the Sunday morning to serve and to be part of whatever it is that you're doing? It's going to be flexible, and people are going to cancel, and somebody's going to come to your church, be there for a couple weeks, and then fizzle out. And some people are going to stay for a while, and some people, things pop up, and then you've got events, and then all of a sudden you figure out, oh, this event we were going to do, actually we can't meet at this location anymore, so now we have to find a new location. And then Sunday morning, things break, and now we got to spend money in different ways about different things. So it's kind of a basic thing in some senses, but if you can't be flexible, then it's going to be super, super, super difficult because things change basically on a weekly basis. And I would say especially those first few years of any church plant, things are just going to change a whole lot, and they're going to change super frequently. They're going to change very consistently, and you're going to have to pivot a whole lot and come up with fresh ideas and creative ways to make something happen when you don't have the money to make it happen. You don't have the resources to make it happen. You don't have the time to make it happen. You don't have anything to make it happen, but finding ways to be flexible to make it happen and doing the hard work of learning and growing and all those sorts of things. You have to be flexible, so it takes a lot of time. It's a lot of hard work. You have to be flexible. You got to be creative about it. But then the fourth one is, and this one's kind of an interesting one, is I would say in those first few years, especially if you find yourself in a position where I moved down to this church plant and I was there for the very beginning. In those first few years, I would say for probably most any church plant is probably of all of its seasons will be simultaneously the most exciting seasons because you got all these brand new things and these, milestones, if you will. You'll hit a lot of those, but I would say in another sense is it's probably going to be its worst few seasons. Those first few years are going to be the most difficult seasons, and it's going to be the worst of it. And most of it's because of this is as you're brand new to something, you're leading a brand new church, or maybe you're part of a team where the pastor's leading a brand new church, and the biggest mistakes they're probably going to make is going to be in those first few years. The worst mistakes that they make is probably going to be in those first few years. And for you, probably your biggest mistakes are going to be in those first few years, and your biggest or worst mistakes are going to be in those first few years. And so learning how to have grace with people and to learn and to understand that these first few years are going to be the most difficult, the most tumultuous, if I guess that word fits. But those first few years are going to be kind of the most difficult to go through because you're learning a lot of new things and you're making a lot of mistakes of maybe you were supposed to wait for this, but instead you went, or maybe in this situation you went, but you were supposed to wait, or maybe you made a bad decision about a way to do the service or a way to go about things or an event and then how much money to put in the event. And then you make bad decisions about whether a leader was hitting a standard or not hitting a standard, or whether they were hitting the standard or weren't hitting the standard. There's just a lot of things that you make decisions about on a very consistent basis, and very likely the most times you're going to make the bad decisions amongst all of the thousands of decisions you have to make is probably going to be in those first few years. And so Give yourself grace, give your pastors grace, give your team grace, because everybody's learning and everybody's growing, because the culture is being formed and culture is defined by your yes and your no. And the vision is being casted and it's being clarified and it's being refined. And so in all of that process, there's going to be lots of yeses and nos that are either really bad or really great. And you kind of just have to work through it and you have to go through those moments. But the good part of it is at the end of the day, you stick with that team and you go through those really difficult seasons, and then the bond just gets tighter and things get so much better. And especially as years go on, then you have a much better bond with those people that you've been through those really crappy decisions with, whether it's they made them or you made them or whatever it is. You just form better bonds with those people. So then the last thing, number 5 of my list of 5 things for a church plant, is systems are super duper duper necessary. You have to have really great, good systems, because in a in a church plant, again, kind of like what I was saying earlier, if you don't do your job really well, then eventually it's just going to fizzle out. And you don't have the luxury of kind of being able to slack and other things just carry the momentum. So systems are so vital. Things like first-time guests and how you follow up with them, how you onboard volunteers, how you communicate to volunteers, how you communicate as a staff, how you set and establish culture and vision, and how you kind of build all the different systems of how people sign up to serve, how people get info from you as a church, how people can get plugged into an event, how people can invite their friends. All of those different systems that you need in a church, you need to really focus on making those really great and being very on top of those things, because if you don't have great systems, then people are just going to fall through the cracks, and it's just going to be, oh, we didn't get their contact info, so there just goes somebody floating off in the distance, and they never find community. They never find connection, because maybe it's you dropped the ball, or you didn't think through your process enough, or you didn't commit to the process, whatever it is. We've all been there in the boat where you meet somebody, and because you didn't just get simple info from them, or in the volunteer onboarding process, you didn't have a clear structure, and so one person went in and got in really quickly, but then the other person, it took them months, so they fizzled out, those sorts of things. You have to have really great systems in order to get... You have to have great systems, and if you don't have great systems, then things just kind of don't happen. But also at the other end of that is that systems, they are important, they are necessary, but systems are a means to an end. And at the end of the day, what people are really looking for is community. People are really looking for care. People just want to be noticed. They want to be seen. They want to be loved. They want to feel like they're part of something. And so what can be really easy for in a newer church is for the systems to become sort of king and become the end-all be-all of everything. That if our systems are good, then everything else is good. You have to have great systems, but you have to have great care. And if you cannot care for your people that are in the systems, then you're just going to end up sort of using people. And I've seen that way too many times with church plants that I knew people at this church plant or that church or whatever it is, just seen way too often that the systems essentially build into a network where you just use people for their talents and for their gifts. And so systems help with keeping a netting to retain people, but they have to be paired with the care and with the discipleship and with loving people and actually building real community. That the people that are jumping into this, they're not just people to get the work done. It's a community to do life with. And that's, I think, especially early on when a lot of work has to be done, because that's just the case. A lot of work has to be done in a church plant. But if the people that are there and involved with it, if they are just there to do the work and to make the thing happen, then they're going to leave and they're just going to fizzle out, and it's going to be a quick fizzle out because they don't find community, they don't find care, they don't find love. So systems are great, but they have to be met with the care. Those are my little things for church plant, things I've learned. There's a lot of other things I've learned from being part of a church plant, but those are 5 in particular that I've just been thinking about recently. And so hopefully these things help, whether you are involved in a church plant yourself or you are going into a church plant, whatever it is. Hopefully these things help. And whether you're in youth ministry specifically or you're just in ministry in general. Hopefully these help. So thanks for watching. Appreciate you being here, and feel free to like. And in the comments, if you'd like to put a comment of maybe some topics you'd like to hear about or things discussed, always open to feedback of any sort. So hopefully you have a great day. Thanks for being here. Thanks for watching. And if it's summertime and it's nice out where you're at, go outside, go get in the sun, get some vitamin D, and have some coffee, all that. So see you.